They say getting old is like slipping into a fog. Quiet, slow, barely noticeable until the world around you begins to speak louder than you do. I never thought I'd be the one sitting silently in a room full of family, feeling like a guest in my own life. But here I was, Margaret Louise Halden, 78 years old, freshly widowed after 52 years of marriage, and apparently in the way. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. Not a dramatic day, not stormy or loud, just a quiet, breezy Tuesday. I was in the kitchen making lemon tea, the kind George used to like, even though I didn't really have anyone to make it for anymore. The house smelled like lavender polish and old wood. I had just watered the violets by the sink when the phone rang. My daughter, Elaine. I smiled when I saw her name flash on the little screen. I always did. She had that voice that still sounded like age 6 when she was trying to convince me to let her skip piano practice. Mom, can we come by tonight? All of us? Just to talk about a few things. I didn't think much of it. Maybe they were finally going to ask about the attic or wanted help with college applications for Matt. So I tidied the living room, set out some cookies, and even lit a vanilla candle from last Christmas. When Elaine arrived later that evening with Tom and Matt, they walked in like they were preparing for a presentation, not a visit. Their faces were stretched tight with polite smiles, the kind that feel more like tape holding something broken in place. Elaine sat on the couch across from me and took my hand. Her voice dropped half an octave into that tone people use when they're about to tell you something you don't want to hear. Mom, she began, we've been talking and we think it might be time to consider something a little safer. Safer? I frowned but stayed quiet. Tom, always the practical one, jumped in. You're in this big house by yourself. We worry. What if you fall? What if you need help and no one's around? Matt was glued to his phone, not saying a word, just occasionally smirking at something I would never understand. Elaine squeezed my hand. We found a really beautiful assisted living community just 15 minutes away. They have a garden. They even do music nights and yoga. It's not a nursing home. It's more like a resort. I looked from one face to another, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. You want me to leave my home? Elaine quickly backtracked. No, Mom. We just want you to be somewhere comfortable. Somewhere where people can help if you need it. Then it came. The thing that had been itching under the surface. Tom cleared his throat. We've been thinking if you're not going to be using the house, it might make sense for us to move in. Just temporarily. Our place is getting tight, and with the renovations we've been planning. There it was. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about yoga classes or blooming gardens or bingo nights. It was about the house. The house George and I built from the ground up, brick by brick, with our bare hands and dreams. The same house where I spent every Christmas, every sick day with the kids, every fight and makeup and quiet Sunday morning. They wanted to free up the house for themselves. I felt my chest tighten, not with anger yet, just confusion. I had always been the one to give time, money, my body, my rest, my silence. When George got sick, I was the one who held his hand through every appointment. When Elaine was left alone with a colicky newborn, I moved in for 3 months to help. When Matt wanted that fancy summer camp, I dipped into my savings without a second thought. I was always there. Always. And now, I was being asked to leave quietly. I smiled. I nodded. I told them I'd think about it. They looked relieved, like they'd just passed a difficult test. Elaine hugged me tighter than usual. Tom promised to help pack. Matt said nothing. Just a quick, see you, Grandma, and a glance back at his phone. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the halls of my home, barefoot on creaky floorboards, touching the walls like they might speak back. I stood in the kitchen and let my hands rest on the counter where I'd rolled 1,000 batches of cookies. I sat in the armchair by the window, the one that still smelled faintly like George's aftershave. Everything felt alive. Everything felt like memory. I started packing the next morning, not because I agreed with them, but because I needed time. Space. I needed to retreat the way a wounded animal does, not because it's weak, but because it knows healing isn't meant to be witnessed. Elaine helped me load the boxes into her SUV that Friday. She looked around like the house was already hers. We'll take good care of it, she promised. You don't have to worry about a thing. Funny, that was the same thing I used to tell her when she was scared at night. You don't have to worry, baby. Mommy's here. I moved into the home that afternoon. They called it Maple Glen, an assisted living facility with beige walls, lavender soap, and a receptionist who smiled too hard. My room had a twin bed, one dresser, a little window facing the back lot, and a small sticker on the door with my name, Margaret L. Halden. The place didn't smell bad. That surprised me. It smelled like lemon polish and something sweet. Vanilla, maybe. The nurses were nice. Too nice. One of them patted my hand and said, "Welcome home." I nearly laughed. This wasn't home. Home was the creaky stairs, the squeaky faucet, the ghost of George humming in the hallway. I unpacked my things slowly. A few framed pictures, my wedding ring, a quilt I made with my sister when we were girls. That was all. A life boiled down to 2 suitcases and a name tag. Elaine called that night. "Did you settle in okay?" she asked. I told her I did. She sounded relieved. Then she added casually, "Tom might come by the house tomorrow to bring in some of our stuff. Just a few things to get us started." "Of course," I said. "It's your house now." There was a silence on the line. Not guilt, just awkwardness. "Okay. Good night, Mom. Love you." "I love you too." I hung up. Then I sat on the edge of the bed in a room that didn't know me, in a place where no one called me Mom or Margaret or anything but Miss Halden, and I felt the weight of every year I had lived. Every diaper I'd changed, every bill I'd paid, every sacrifice I'd made. I had given them everything, and now they had taken even the roof over my head. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not yet. But inside, something quiet began to rise. Not grief. Not yet rage. Resolve. There's a silence to care homes. Not the peaceful kind. Not the silence of a sleeping baby or a soft snowfall. No. It's the kind that hums beneath your skin, the kind that settles into the floorboards and watches you, reminding you with every creak, an echo that this is where the world puts people it no longer knows what to do with. The morning after I moved into Maple Glen, I woke up to a knock on the door. Soft. 3 times. Then the door creaked open before I could respond. "Good morning, Miss Margaret," the nurse said brightly. "Time for your vitals and breakfast. Do you want raisins or brown sugar in your oatmeal today?" I blinked against the dull light filtering in through the blinds. My throat was dry. The question hung in the air like a balloon I didn't want to pop. "Brown sugar," I whispered. She smiled, noted something on her clipboard, and wheeled in a tray. I sat up slowly, knees aching from the strange mattress. The oatmeal was lukewarm. The coffee was weak. But I ate it anyway. Because that's what you do when you've been raised to be polite, even in places that feel like padded waiting rooms for the forgotten. I spent the morning walking the halls. Slowly, deliberately. Each corridor smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old linens. The walls were lined with soft pastel art, nothing too bold, nothing that shouted. It was the kind of art designed to be ignored. Names were taped to every door. First names, last initials. Marjorie L. Edna B. Hank W. No family photos. Just whiteboards with notes like shower day or daughter visiting Thursday. Some had notes that hadn't been changed in weeks. In the common room, a television played one of those endless morning shows with fake laughter and weather updates no one listened to. There were about 10 of us there. Some dozed. Some stared blankly. A few murmured conversations that drifted like fog. That's when I met Marjorie. She was sitting near the window, red lipstick perfectly applied. Her hair curled like she had somewhere better to be. "You're new," she said without looking at me. I nodded. "Margaret." She turned, gave me a once-over. "You still have your own teeth?" I blinked, then chuckled. "Most of them." She smiled. "You'll survive." That was our introduction. Marjorie became my anchor in those first few days. She had been at Maple Glen for almost 2 years. "Came here after my daughter decided my house was too far from Whole Foods," she told me. Apparently, my presence wasn't convenient for the carpool schedule. We played bingo together on Wednesdays. She always won. Not because of luck, but because she stole extra cards and the staff pretended not to notice. "You have to make your own wins at this age," she said. "Every night, I returned to my room and stared at the ceiling. Sometimes I'd fall asleep with my phone clutched in one hand, hoping maybe, just maybe, Elaine would call. Just to check in. Just to say goodnight. But it stayed cold and silent, lit only by the glow of a digital clock that ticked through the hours like a countdown. One Friday afternoon, I got my first visitor. Elaine. She brought a store-bought cake and a forced smile. Her eyes darted around the room, never quite settling. "It's nice," she said. I shrugged. "It's quiet." She set the cake down. "We've started moving into the house. Tom's already repainted the kitchen. The old tiles were kind of falling apart, you know? Were they? I wouldn't know. I hadn't been back since I left." She talked for 20 minutes. All surface, all sunshine. Then, just as she stood to leave, she said, "I think this place will be good for you, Mom. You'll make friends. You'll stay active. And it's safer." I didn't say anything. Because what do you say to someone who packaged abandonment in bubble wrap and tied it with a bow? That night, I sat with Marjorie in the courtyard. She was lighting a cigarette, even though we weren't supposed to. "You don't have to act like this is fine, you know," she said, not looking at me. I stared at the moon. What would be the point? She took a long drag. "The point is, Margaret, they think we're done. They think we're here to fade away. That's what this place is for, quiet exits. Controlled endings. The graceful kind." I swallowed hard. I just wanted to help. My whole life, I gave everything to that house. That family. "And now?" she asked. I paused, then whispered, "Now I'm not sure who I am without them." She flicked ash to the ground. "Maybe it's time to find out." I went to bed that night and didn't cry. I'd already done enough of that in silence. But I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would look like to be someone again. Not a mother. Not a burden. Not a patient. Just Margaret. And for the first time since I arrived, I dreamed. Not of the past, but of what might still be ahead. It started with an envelope. Not a dramatic discovery. Not someone blurting out a secret or screaming in the rain. No, it was much quieter than that. Just an envelope, left on my nightstand by mistake, tucked beneath my latest activity calendar and a brochure for arthritis-friendly yoga. I almost threw it away. The return address caught my eye first. A legal firm. Stern and Blake, LLP. It meant nothing to me at first. I assumed it was some billing statement, maybe a waiver I forgot to sign. But something about the weight of it made me pause. I opened it slowly. The paper was thick, official. A letter addressed not to me directly, but to Estate of Margaret Halden, care of Elaine Thomas. I blinked. Estate? I'm not dead. The next page made my hands tremble. It was a property transfer agreement. My house, had been legally transferred into Elaine's name. Not temporarily, not in trust, but fully. Finalized. Sold. I read the words over and over, my eyes swimming. There was my signature at the bottom, neatly scrawled in blue ink. The date was exactly 4 days before I left for Maple Glen. I never signed that. My chest tightened. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. A clerical error. Someone using an old document. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. Someone had forged my name. Not just badly either. It was convincing. Too convincing. I sat frozen for a long time, my fingers pressed to the page, afraid to tear it, afraid to let it go. Marjorie found me like that a half hour later. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice unusually soft. I didn't answer. I just handed her the letter. She read it once, then again. Her jaw tightened. "Sweetheart," she said, "you've been robbed." Those words hit harder than anything. Robbed. Not by strangers. Not by thieves in the night. By my daughter. By the little girl whose scraped knees I kissed, whose birthday cakes I baked, whose tears I wiped during heartbreaks and late-night fevers. That same girl had taken the house I built with her father's hands and sold it as if I were a piece of furniture left behind in the attic. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the little desk in my room with a borrowed laptop from the front desk. I searched the firm name. Legitimate. Expensive. Specializing in real estate and estate planning. I searched the property records. Next. There it was. Transferred. Finalized. Recorded. Sold. Legally binding. Gone. The next day, I asked to speak with the facility's visiting legal advisor. A quiet man named Paul, maybe in his 50s, with tired eyes and a voice like a gentle engine. I showed him the letter. I told him everything. He listened patiently, then leaned forward. "You're saying you never signed this?" I nodded. "Never." He tapped his pen on the paper. "You do understand what this means, right?" "I think so." He looked me in the eyes. "If this signature is forged, and we can prove it, what they've done is illegal. Criminal, even. But we need evidence. We need to move carefully. Criminal." The word sounded ugly, heavy. But what choice did I have? For the next week, Paul helped me file for a handwriting analysis, request an investigation into the transfer, and prepare a statement. He moved discreetly, carefully, so nothing tipped off Elaine or Tom. During those days, I felt like I was wearing a mask. I still went to bingo. I still joined the watercolor class. I still laughed at Marjorie's jokes. But inside, I was splitting in half. Half of me was heartbroken. Half of me was furious. Elaine called on Thursday. She was cheerful, casual. "Mom, we just got the new countertops installed. You wouldn't believe the difference. And the backyard? Tom's planning a little patio. Maybe you can visit soon once you're settled." I stayed silent. "Mom, you still there?" I said the only thing I could say. "I'm here." She had no idea what I knew. Not yet. But I was no longer the same woman who had walked quietly out of her house 2 weeks ago. Something had changed. I had changed. I could feel it in my spine, in the way I sat straighter, in the way my voice no longer trembled when I said my name. A week later, the results came back. The handwriting expert confirmed what I already knew. The signature on the transfer was forged. Paul looked at me carefully. "We can press charges," he said. "We can sue for fraudulent transfer. You might be able to reclaim the property, but it will be a fight, and it will be public." I nodded slowly. "Let's fight." I never thought I'd be filing a legal case at 78. But that's the funny thing about dignity. It doesn't expire. It doesn't shrink with age. It only hides until you remember where you left it. The first court hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. Elaine was served with papers the next morning. She didn't call. Instead, Tom sent a cold, formal message to my phone. "This is outrageous, Margaret. After everything we've done for you, you're attacking your own family." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed 2 words. "You started." I always thought the scariest part of getting older was the slow erosion of memory, the betrayal of your own body. But I was wrong. The scariest part is realizing that the people you loved most, who you raised, sacrificed for, defended, have rewritten you out of your own life. Silently, efficiently, with smiles, but not anymore. 3 days after we got confirmation that the signature on the property deed was forged, I filed an affidavit with the county court. Paul, the advisor at Maple Glen, helped me draft everything. He spoke with a calm certainty that soothed my shaking hands and steadied my voice. "This isn't just about a house," he told me. "It's about agency and justice." He was right. It wasn't about the bricks or the garden or the cabinets I'd spent 20 years scrubbing. It was about being erased and deciding I would not go quietly. The official complaint was served to Elaine and Tom at 9:14 a.m. on a Monday morning. I imagined them opening it. I imagined Elaine's hand trembling, Tom cursing under his breath. I imagined them trying to justify it, telling themselves I was confused, irrational, maybe even senile. They didn't realize how lucid I was, how dangerous a woman can be when she has nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. The first phone call came that evening. Elaine's voice was sharp, frantic. "Mom, what are you doing?" I said nothing. "You're suing us? Over the house? You don't even live there anymore." I took a breath, kept my tone even. "You stole from me. You forged my name." There was silence. Then, "We didn't mean for it to go that far. You were already moving out. We thought it made sense." "You thought it made sense to take everything I had? That's not fair," she snapped. "No," I replied, "it's not." She hung up. 2 days later, I received a letter from her attorney. They offered to settle quietly, return the house, and issue a formal apology. if I agreed to drop the case and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Paul raised an eyebrow when he read it. Classic damage control, he muttered. They're scared. I didn't sign. I wasn't doing this for hush money or empty apologies. I was doing this because the truth mattered. Because the woman in the mirror, the one with gray hair and crow's feet and a back that didn't always straighten like it used to, deserved better. The court date was set. It was a bright spring morning when I stepped into the courtroom, wearing my best navy suit and the string of pearls George gave me on our 40th anniversary. My hands didn't shake. My steps didn't falter. Elaine and Tom sat on the other side of the room, stiff, avoiding my eyes. My statement was simple. I did not sign that document. I was misled, removed from my home under the guise of concern, and my property was taken without consent. I am not confused. I am not frail. I am angry, and I am here. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, nodded slowly. I hear you, Mrs. Halden. And she did. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Evidence was presented. The handwriting analyst testified. Paul read excerpts from emails and texts Elaine had sent to the realtor about getting the property before Mom changes her mind. It was damning and devastating, but it was also empowering, because for the first time in years, I wasn't someone's mother or grandmother or patient. I was me, Margaret Louise Halden, widow, survivor, fighter. That evening, back at Maple Glen, Marjorie knocked on my door. She had a bottle of grape juice she'd stolen from the kitchen. To taking your power back, she said, raising her cup. We clinked plastic tumblers and sipped in silence. I never thought I'd end up in court at this age, I admitted. Marjorie smiled. Honey, at this age, most people stop standing up for themselves. That's why your story matters. And suddenly I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every woman who had been told she was too old to matter. Every mother who had given and given until there was nothing left. Every elder who had been silenced, sidelined, and stolen from by the very people they built their lives around. I wasn't just reclaiming my home. I was reclaiming my voice. They say court is slow, but no one tells you how lonely it is. After the first hearing, I expected things to move quickly. I imagined justice rolling in like a train on time. But instead, it crept forward in dusty files, rescheduled dates, and late-night email threads filled with words I barely understood. Still, I didn't stop. Every week brought a new motion, a new attempt from Elaine's lawyers to paint me as unwell, confused, manipulated. I read their filings with a numb kind of disbelief. Elderly woman with declining cognitive function, no memory of initial arrangements, misunderstood nature of family agreements. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I documented everything. I met with Paul twice a week. I gave him copies of every birthday card I'd written, every email where I asked about the house, every time I voiced discomfort and got brushed off. I even found a voicemail from Elaine, dated just 2 weeks before the move. Her voice was bright, but unmistakable. Mom, don't worry about signing anything. We'll take care of the paperwork for you. The implication was clear. She knew I hadn't signed it, because she never expected I'd question it. The media caught wind of the case in late May. A local reporter contacted Paul. He asked if I'd be willing to speak. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to be a spectacle. But Marjorie, ever the voice of reason, said something that stuck with me. If your story makes one woman stop doubting her own worth, it's worth telling. So I agreed. The article came out with the headline, Elderly Woman Battles Her Own Daughter in House Fraud Scandal. My phone buzzed nonstop that day. Most of the messages were from strangers, women, older women, some from across the country. My son tried to get me into assisted living so he could sell my house. You're braver than I ever was. They called me crazy. Now I know I wasn't alone. Keep going. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for us. I cried that night, not from sadness, but from a release I hadn't known I needed. But Elaine? She went quiet. Tom, however, sent a furious message through their lawyer demanding a gag order. They didn't want more stories, more scrutiny. They wanted me to disappear again. It backfired. The judge denied their request. Instead, She issued a motion to compel a handwriting re-examination using financial documents I'd signed over the years. Another win for us. At our next hearing, Elaine finally showed up in person. She looked thinner, tired, but when our eyes met, she didn't flinch. She looked at me like I was the one who had betrayed her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked during a recess, cornering me near the vending machines. "Why are you trying to ruin me?" I stared at her for a moment. "I gave you everything," I said quietly, "and you took the last thing I had without even asking." Her eyes welled with tears. I didn't know if they were real. "You don't understand what it's like, Mom. The mortgage, the kids. We were drowning. So you chose to drown me instead?" She looked away. I walked back into the courtroom. That week, I testified. I stood on shaky knees and told the judge, the lawyers, the gallery, and even my daughter the full truth about the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. I told them about every sleepless night, every phone call that never came, every time I had smiled through hurt, because that's what mothers are supposed to do. And then I told them this. They thought I wouldn't fight back, that I'd fade quietly into a beige room with bingo and soft pudding. But I am not done. I have lived a full life, and I will not let the final chapter be written by someone who stopped seeing me as a person. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Not even Tom looked up. The judge nodded slowly. She didn't speak yet, but I saw something shift in her expression, a recognition, maybe even a kind of respect. Back at Maple Glen, I returned to my room and lay in bed, exhausted but strangely light. Paul called later that night. "You did well," he said. "Very well." I smiled. "Thank you." He paused. "We might win this, Margaret." I closed my eyes. I know, because the truth is, I'd already won something far more important. My voice. I'd barely slept the night before the verdict. I tried. I made my tea. I brushed my hair, laid out my clothes, even sprayed the lavender mist I usually save for special occasions. But my heart wouldn't still. It beat too loud, too hard, like it knew the weight of what was coming. The decision wasn't just about brick and wood. It was about dignity, memory, justice. The house was never just a house. It was every Christmas roast, every night of feverish lullabies, every whispered promise that this family would always stand together. Now, that family sat divided across a courtroom aisle, waiting to find out if the law saw me as a mother betrayed or a senile old woman causing drama. I arrived at the courthouse early, Paul by my side. He carried his leather briefcase in one hand and an extra coffee in the other. I didn't drink any of it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Elaine and Tom were already seated when I entered. She wore gray, no makeup. Her jaw was tight. Tom looked at the wall. Not once did he meet my gaze. The judge took her seat. She didn't delay. Her voice was calm, even but firm. After reviewing the evidence, including handwriting analysis, witness testimony, and financial documents, this court finds that the transfer of ownership was conducted fraudulently. My heart stuttered. Mrs. Margaret Halden's signature was forged, and her consent was neither documented nor clearly given. I could feel my fingers tightening around the seat. Not in fear, in disbelief. The court orders immediate reversal of the property deed. The house is to be returned to the rightful owner, Mrs. Halden, within 30 days. Furthermore, restitution is to be paid for legal expenses incurred by the plaintiff. It was over. Just like that. No cheers, no gasps, just the weight of silence breaking over my shoulders like a second skin being peeled away. The judge rose. The gavel fell once. I stayed seated for a long time. Paul touched my arm gently. "You did it, Margaret." But I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. I looked across the room. Elaine was crying. Tom muttered something to her, and she pulled away. For a moment, she looked like a child again. Lost, cornered, wounded, but not innocent. She stood and walked toward me slowly. The courtroom had mostly emptied. It was just us now, a mother and daughter in the ruins of something they had built together, brick by emotional brick. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "But you did," I replied softly. "We were drowning in debt. The kids needed." I held up my hand. "You could have asked." Her eyes filled again. "Would you have said yes?" "I would have said something. I would have given you help." Not everything, but something. She looked down at her shoes. So, what happens now? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. I had the house back. The papers would be filed. The locks would be changed. But the cracks between us? Those didn't get reversed with a court order. Now, I finally said, you sit with what you did, and you figure out who you want to be on the other side of that. I turned and walked out, the sunlight outside too bright for my tired eyes. At Maple Glen, Marjorie was waiting on the bench near the courtyard. She stood when she saw me, hands on her hips. Well, she asked. I didn't need to speak. She saw it in my face. She whooped so loudly a nurse came running. We spent that afternoon eating chocolate cake. Someone snuck in from a local bakery. Marjorie insisted on playing Frank Sinatra on her portable speaker. The sky was soft with early summer blue. And for the first time in months, I felt full. Not because I'd won a court case, but because I had finally said no. Because I had finally said enough. Later that night, I stood by the window in my room. I looked out over the quiet lawn of Maple Glen, its trimmed hedges and stiff plastic chairs. I had been here for almost 2 months. It had felt like a prison once. A padded cage lined with polite routines. But now, it felt like a chapter closing. I packed a small overnight bag. My house was still technically occupied for a few more weeks. But Paul said I could visit, check in, begin to transition back. And I would, on my terms, because this time, the door wouldn't be closing behind me. This time, I'd be the one with the keys. It had been exactly 62 days since I left the house. I didn't count the days at first. I didn't want to. But after the verdict, after the gavel, after the papers, after the silence that followed, I found myself tracing every calendar square, one by one, with the edge of a pen. And now I was going back. I didn't tell Elaine. I didn't need to. The court order had been filed. The locksmith had already changed the locks. Paul had offered to escort me, but I said no. This return needed to be mine and mine alone. I wore my Sunday clothes, not out of vanity, but out of respect for the woman I had once been when I first crossed that doorstep with George in 1974, clutching a set of brass keys and a head full of hope. Back then, the wallpaper was orange. The tiles were cracked. We didn't even have furniture, just a mattress on the floor and dreams big enough to cover it. Now, I stepped into a stranger's version of that dream. The first thing I noticed was the smell. My home didn't smell like lavender polish and cinnamon anymore. It smelled sterile. New paint and plastic. The kitchen had been redone in gray and white. The cabinets were glossy like magazine pages. The old wooden chairs were gone, replaced with something sleek and soulless. I walked from room to room like a ghost retracing her own footsteps. The photos were gone. The quilts. The shelves I had dusted every Saturday for 40 years. The only thing that remained unchanged was the crack in the hallway tile, near the closet where George used to hide birthday presents. I stood over it and smiled. It was still mine. The process of reclaiming my life didn't happen in a grand sweep. There was no dramatic montage, no overnight healing. It began with small things. I bought back my favorite chair from the secondhand store where Elaine had donated it. I found my wedding album at the bottom of a box labeled miscellaneous. I rehung the wind chimes George had gifted me on our 25th anniversary. One by one, I filled the house with me again. Not just the things, but the choices. I painted the guest room yellow. Not because anyone was coming to stay, but because I liked how the sun danced on yellow walls. I planted geraniums again. Even though my knees protested, I sang to them while I watered, the same lullabies I used to hum when Elaine was small. I signed up for an online watercolor class. I baked a peach cobbler just because. I listened to jazz in the living room with the lights off, and I danced, slow, soft, alone, but not lonely. Marjorie called often. How's freedom taste, sugar? Like warm biscuits and quiet afternoons, I told her. She laughed. Sounds like heaven. One morning, while trimming the rose bushes, a car pulled into the driveway. Elaine. She stepped out slowly, holding a box in both hands. She didn't look sure of herself. She didn't look angry either, just hesitant. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and met her halfway. I thought you might want these, she said, offering the box. Some things from your old room at the home. I wasn't sure what to do with them. I took it. Inside were my teacups, my reading glasses, a half-finished crossword puzzle. I nodded, not quite ready for words. She lingered. You've done a lot, she said, looking around. It looks like you again. It is me, I replied. We stood in silence. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Can I come in? I hesitated, not out of spite, but out of something deeper, self-preservation. I had built this version of my life from rubble, and I wasn't ready to let her rearrange the furniture again. Not today, I said gently, but maybe another time. She nodded. Okay. As she turned to leave, she paused. I really am sorry, Mom. I didn't respond. Not yet. Some things take longer to heal than court dates and apologies. Later that evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sky turn purple. I sipped tea from my favorite cup, the one with the tiny crack near the rim. The crack didn't bother me anymore. It gave the cup character, proof that it had been used, loved, mended. Much like me, I wasn't bitter. I wasn't broken. I was just beginning again. There's a difference between rebuilding your life and protecting it. Winning the house back gave me my physical space. Reclaiming my voice gave me strength. But peace? Peace is a garden that needs boundaries. Otherwise, everything, old patterns, guilt, manipulation, grows back like weeds. Elaine started calling again after that first visit. Nothing heavy, just polite check-ins. Hey, Mom. Just wondering how you're feeling. Thought I'd drop off some groceries. Maybe cook dinner for you. I appreciated the effort. I did. But there was something in her voice, soft, rehearsed, that reminded me of how this all began. Sweetness laced with convenience. Affection dipped in guilt. I knew that voice now. So I responded kindly, but clearly. Thank you, Elaine. But I've got dinner covered. Are you sure? I make a great roast chicken now. So do I said, smiling. She laughed a little too tightly. Okay, well, next time then. I said nothing. There wasn't going to be a next time. Not yet. Not until I believed she truly wanted to be in my life, not just back in my kitchen. Marjorie called that night. We still checked in once a week. You sound calm, she said. I feel calm. That's when they usually come knocking again, she warned. She wasn't wrong. A few days later, Tom called. I hadn't heard his voice since the courtroom. Hey, Margaret, he started awkwardly. I wanted to apologize. I know things got tense. They got illegal, Tom, I said, voice steady. He paused. Right. Well, I just want you to know there's no hard feelings. There aren't, I agreed, because I've moved on. We were hoping, maybe sometime soon, you'd be open to Sunday dinners again. The kids miss you. That hit harder than I expected. The kids. I hadn't seen Matt or the others since this all started. I didn't even know if they understood what had happened, or if they had been told some sugar-coated version of Grandma got confused. I wanted to see them, but not like this. If they want to see me, I said, they're welcome to visit, but not as a package deal with you and Elaine. Margaret, come on. No, I said gently. This is the line, Tom. I've drawn it. I'm not angry. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. There was silence. Then he muttered, okay, and hung up. That Sunday, Matt showed up. Alone. He was taller than I remembered. Leaner. His voice deeper. Hi, Grandma. Hi, sweetheart. He stood on the porch like he wasn't sure he was welcome. I opened the door wide and smiled. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. He looked relieved. We spent the afternoon playing cards and talking about school. I didn't bring up the house. Neither did he. He asked if I still painted. I showed him a small watercolor I'd been working on, a sunflower against a stormy sky. It's really good, he said. You should sell them. I laughed. Or maybe I'll just hang them in every room so no one forgets who lives here. That night, I sat by the fireplace with a journal in my lap and wrote down a list. My boundaries. I will not welcome manipulation into my home. I will not soften my truth for other people's comfort. I will not confuse guilt with love. I will see my grandchildren when they come in kindness, not obligation. I will say no even when it's hard, especially then. I will remember that protecting my peace is not selfish. It's sacred. The next week, Elaine called again. I heard Matt visited. He did. You didn't tell me. It wasn't your visit to know about. She was quiet. I'd like to come by, she said. Not yet. Why not? I hesitated. Then I said the thing I had needed to say for decades. Because love without respect is not welcome here anymore. She didn't respond. Just hung up. That evening, I brewed a fresh cup of chamomile tea, turned on soft music, and curled up in my chair. The wind moved gently through the geraniums outside. My house felt still, full, and mine again. Peace doesn't come when everyone is happy. Peace comes when you are no longer afraid of making them uncomfortable. And I wasn't afraid anymore. I never intended to be seen. For most of my life, I was the one behind the camera, not in front of it. The one cooking behind the scenes while the family laughed in the dining room. The one who made sure everyone else had a seat, even if I had to stand. But then the article came out. It started small. A local paper. Elderly woman reclaims home after family fraud. A story buried somewhere between weather reports and community events. But someone shared it. Then someone else. And then it spread like wildfire. Within days, my inbox was flooded. Emails from women across the country. Your story is mine. I thought I was crazy. But now I see I was just too kind. You made me feel brave again. It was overwhelming. Some of the stories were heart-wrenching. Mothers who had been tricked into giving up their homes. Grandmothers whose pensions had been drained by ungrateful children. Widows ignored, isolated, erased. They saw themselves in me, and I couldn't look away. So I wrote back. Every night I sat at my kitchen table, and typed out responses. Not long essays, just a few sentences of acknowledgement. I see you. You are not alone. You are allowed to take your life back. A woman named Teresa emailed from Oregon. She had been placed in a home temporarily while her son renovated her condo. 6 months later, she discovered he had sold it. I didn't even know it was possible to fight back until I read about you, she wrote. A retired teacher named Lila messaged me on Facebook. You didn't just win a house, Margaret. You lit a fire in women who've been sitting in the dark for too long. It made me think of something Marjorie had said once. We don't need a revolution. Just one woman brave enough to say no more. So I did something I never thought I would. I started a blog, The Reclaimed Chair. I picked the name because I once gave up my seat at every table. Now I was building my own. I posted once a week. Short reflections, little stories, lessons I learned along the way. How to set boundaries without guilt. What it really means to say, I forgive you, and mean it. The day I took the house key back, the blog gained followers, a lot of them. By the end of the month, I was invited to speak on a podcast for women over 60. The host asked me what advice I had for other women feeling powerless. I paused before answering. Don't wait for permission, I said. They won't give it. You take it. You declare your life worthy of being lived on your terms, even if it means people get uncomfortable. Especially then. That clip was shared more than 100,000 times. I started getting invites from senior centers, women's groups, even a college sociology class. Me, a 78-year-old grandmother with 2 bad knees and a heart that had been broken too many times to count. People wanted to hear me speak, not because I was a victim, but because I had stopped being one. One Saturday, I spoke at a community center just 2 towns over. The room was packed, mostly women, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, some with canes, some with notebooks. I stood at the front, palms sweating, knees locked. Then I looked at them, and I saw myself. I told my story, from the tea on that Tuesday afternoon, to the care home, to the forged signature, to the courtroom, to the day I hung the wind chimes back up on my porch. And when I finished, there was silence, then applause, not polite clapping, but the kind that erupts from somewhere deep, rage and relief and pride all tangled into sound. A woman approached me after, tears in her eyes. I always thought my kindness made me weak, she whispered. I took her hand. Your kindness isn't weakness, but letting them use it against you? That stops today. That night, I drove home in silence. The sky stretched wide with stars. I opened the front door, dropped my bag, and stood in the middle of the living room. I was tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from defeat. The kind that comes after doing something real, something that matters. The kind of tired that feels holy. That week, I hung a new picture in the hallway. It was a photo from my first blog post, me, standing on my porch, chin up, wind in my hair. I printed the words below it. You don't have to disappear to keep the peace. You just have to stop shrinking to fit places you've outgrown. I smiled at it. Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat in my chair, opened my laptop, and began writing the next post. I used to think beginnings belonged to the young. That fresh starts came with first jobs, first kisses, first homes. But now, at 78, I know better. Beginnings aren't about age. They're about choice. And one morning, with a warm cup of tea in my hands and sunlight stretching across my kitchen table, I realized something simple and staggering. This was the happiest I had been in years. The house no longer echoed with what had been taken. It sang with what I had reclaimed. Every room told a story, not of loss, but of survival, of soft rebellion, of quiet power. My watercolor paintings now line the hallway. One of sunflowers, one of a stormy lake, and another, a silhouette of a woman standing at her front door, back straight, keys in hand. That one was called Coming Home. Requests kept coming in. Podcasts, interviews, even a book agent who suggested I write a memoir. Women need your story, she said. They need your voice. I laughed at first. Me? A book? But then I thought about all the women who'd written to me. Teresa from Oregon, Lila the retired teacher, and the dozens of others whose stories mirrored mine. Different names, same heartbreak. And I thought, maybe this isn't just my beginning. Maybe it's ours. So I said yes. The book would be titled The Reclaimed Chair: How I Took My Life Back at 78. I wrote each chapter with trembling fingers and a clear heart. I told the truth, not just the betrayal, but the years of small silences before it. The times I let myself be overlooked because I didn't want to make a fuss. The moments I thought keeping the peace was more important than keeping myself. And then I wrote about the turn. The moment I said no. The moment I said, this is mine. The moment I said, I matter. The publishing house didn't expect much. A quiet release, a niche audience. But something happened. Women, thousands of them, started reading, sharing, quoting, crying. The book sold out in 2 weeks. They printed another batch. And another. I started getting letters, handwritten letters, from women who hadn't written to anyone in decades. One from a 92-year-old in Texas who said, I finally told my daughter I'm not babysitting every weekend anymore. Another from a woman in Vermont. I filed for divorce after 38 years. You gave me the courage. Each story was a spark. Each voice a match. Together, we were fire. One morning, I received an invitation. A gallery in New York, yes, New York, had seen my sunflower painting online. They want to feature it in an exhibit called A Woman's Second Act. We'd be honored if you would attend, the curator wrote. I said yes. Marjorie insisted on coming too. She wore her best coat and told everyone she was my manager. You're going to shine, sugar, she said, squeezing my hand on the train. And I did. The gallery was small, warm, buzzing with quiet admiration. My painting hung in the center of the main wall. Beneath it, a placard read, Sunlight After Silence, by Margaret Halden. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I doubted it was real, but because I finally believed it was. After the exhibit, the curator approached me. We'd love to do a solo show for your work. I blinked. A what? Your art. Your story. A full gallery. I smiled. Only if I can bring my rocking chair and a pot of tea. She laughed. Deal. That night, back at the hotel, I sat on the balcony and looked at the stars. The same stars that once shined over me while I wept in a care home, feeling erased. Now they felt closer, like they saw me, like they always had. I opened my journal and wrote one last thing. I thought the story ended when they sent me away. But all that time, the best part hadn't even begun.